So the subject of race and racialness and racism and the Dallas Cowboys came up the other day. 99% of you guys addressed it with me like civil adults. 1% of you didn't. The 1% of you, of course, still welcome here. We're still going to exchange ideas. We're going to try to do it with some level of maturity, dignity, respect, understanding. We have to go into these conversations. Mike Fisher, by the way, covering the Cowboys here in Frisco, home of your Dallas Cowboys. Some civility, which means, listen, somebody looked at my video the other day. They didn't like what I said about Kelvin Joseph. Then they made fun of the dark pigment of my skin, and then they said, why don't you get your bleeping fence stained? Because I guess I was outside and I was by the fence. Again, that's 1% of our audience here. So the subject came up about how delicate we do have to be, especially now. It seems like so many things are a powder keg. Believe me, if you cut me off in traffic, I am waving at you and smiling. Because by the time we get to September, I recognize that if I flip you off, or if I yell at you, or if I honk at you, you might shoot me. It's already dangerous enough to be on your phone while you're driving a car, but pretty soon we're going to have people with their hand waving out the driver's side window holding a gun while they're driving a car. Another subject. So, a powder keg. So, I don't think we need to be scared, but I think we need to be mindful and careful and thoughtful when we discuss this. So, as to the allegation that I'm the one adding a racial component to the Kelvin Joseph criticism, when in fact I'm trying to unplug from that. I'm trying to make it not about race. His foibles, if you will, simply have to do with showing up and going to work. That's all. It has nothing to do with your race. Just show up and go to work. And by the way, the Cowboys did enough homework on Kelvin Joseph. They have every reason to believe that that's going to work out. And that's great. And I want that. So I'm going to tell you the story that I touched on the other day about what I once did when confronted with this issue. I don't know that I would do it the same way today. It's a different climate today. But it did remind me back then, this is 1994, it did remind me of what a weapon it can be to accuse people of these horrific things. How it sticks. It stinks. And it stings when Ezekiel Elliott is accused of domestic violence and then the police find nothing. But the NFL, which also found nothing, pretends it did. And now Ezekiel Elliott haunting him at least just a little bit for the rest of his life for something that there's no evidence that he did. Domestic violence is an issue that's going to be discussed now anew in Dallas sports because Jason Kidd is the new head coach of the Dallas Mavericks. It should be discussed. It should be discussed intelligently and sensitively and fairly. If there's a press conference here Monday, Tuesday, whatever, I've said this on the air and in print, Mavericks owner Mark Cuban should oversee a press conference in person, not on a Zoom meeting. We need to be in the room with Cuban, Nico Harrison, Jason Kidd, and Sint Marshall to ask the difficult, sensitive questions and to hopefully get reasoned answers about Jason Kidd's history, where he's at now, what the organization was thinking, what Cint Marshall was thinking. Was she asked at all? Did she study it? I'd love to be able to report back to you that Cint Marshall sat down with Jason Kidd and studied him, went to lunch with him, went to dinner with him, learned about him, got comfortable with where he is now compared to where he was, whatever it was, 18 years ago. I want that for the Mavericks. I want us to be comfortable with the knowledge that we go into our relationships, regardless of the color of our skin, our ethnic background, our religious differences, our political differences, that we're going into the workplace or into these conversations with an attempt to understand and not just excuse and not yell at and not blame and not accuse. Rapist never goes away, even if you're innocent. Racist never goes away, even if you're innocent. Murderer never goes. Those are probably the big three. They don't go away. So we should be thoughtful when we kick them around. Now I'm going to take you back to 1994. So I had a colleague, I was at the newspaper, I had a colleague, and he was new, and he was kind of my right-hand assistant, helper, deputy, whatever. And he wasn't very good at his job. In fact, he was really bad at his job. Part of his struggles were he wasn't particularly literate. Now, how you get a newspaper job without being particularly literate is a story for another day. So a new sports editor comes in after a year, and he goes and reviews the last year of Cowboy coverage. And he's looking at this, and he's looking at all the stories over the course of the last year, and it looks like, I'm going to make up the number here, but it looks like over the course of 300 days, out of the 900 stories that we had in the newspaper, like 800 of them were from me. 50 of them were from him, and 50 of them were co-bylined by the two of us. And the new sports editor calls this guy in, calls my coworker in, and says, "It looks like you didn't do very much work in the last 300 days. Where's your stories?" And the fella answers, "Well, Fish either won't let me write stories or takes the ones that I write and puts his name on them." And the new sports editor says, "Well, why would he do that?" And my coworker insinuates it's because I was keeping the black man down. I'm still friendly with this guy today, which I think speaks volumes of how I'm going to heaven. Because I should have wanted to kill him. And he should have been probably drummed out of the business. The truth was, this is back when we had trash, what were they called? Those laptop computery things. The truth was, I'd say, "Okay, we got to write 3 stories today." He said, and he said he'll write one, and I said, I'll write the other 2. That's fine. And then, at 8 hours later, he wanted me to check out his story before we sent it in, and his story would have like 2 paragraphs in it. That's how he spent 8 hours. He spent 8 hours, and he came up with 4 sentences. So I would take his computer, and I would fix his story, and I would fluff it up, and I would put some quotes in it, and I would clean up the punctuation and the spelling. If I put something important in there, I'd put both our names on it. Otherwise, I left it as it is and let him have his credit, even though he hadn't done the work. And then I sent my 2 stories in. And then the next day in the newspaper, it's got a story by Mike Fisher, and another story maybe co-written by Mike Fisher and Joe Blow. It was not my intention to take away his shine. He didn't have any shine. He didn't do any work. The fact is, I saved him by making it look like he was doing something. So he gets his hand caught in the cookie jar by the new sports editor and comes up with the first excuse that popped into his head, which is that I was racially motivated to not let him write. So I get called in. The sports editor, who I don't know him. He knows my work. He knows that I had won. By this time, I had won our newspapers. I'd been there 4 years. I'd won our newspapers Employee of the Year 2 straight years, or 2 out of the 4 years. I was considered, pretty good. And he gets me on the phone and tells me about this accusation and says, you're going to need to come in and meet with me and meet with the publisher. Well, I'd been there 4 years. I'd never met the publisher. I'd been there 4 years. I barely went into the office because I was a little busy working my ass off at Valley Ranch. So he tells me the accusation, and I say, he said, can you come in next week? Or I said, no, I'll be in today. I'll be in there in an hour. And I go in there, with my little briefcase and my little trash, whatever it was, computer, prepared to show them whatever I needed to show them. And they say, here's the accusation. How do you plead? And then a light bulb went up over my head. I said, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. Because how can I establish my real relationships with people of color? I'm being accused of this. It's not true. You guys should, frankly, you guys should assume it's not true. I think. But since you maybe are assuming the other, how could I possibly establish with you that my relationships with people of color are, frankly, they're the backbone of what I do since I cover the NFL? Well, Mike, we don't know. I said, I know. And I pulled out not a Rolodex. Now everything, of course, is in your phone, but this is my little phone book in a little black book. True story. And I said to the publisher, randomly flip through there, and point your finger at a page. He said, okay. Flips through, points from the page. What you pointing at? What are you on? The W's. What do you got? It says Woodson, Darren. And they go, you have Darren Woodson's phone number? Yeah. And they said, okay, well, what about it? I said, call him. What do you mean? I said, call Darren Woodson. Oh, we couldn't call. Yeah, you can. Call Darren Woodson. You can do it on my phone, which I think we did do. I think I had my stupid little crappy cell phone. And say what? Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess you could call Darren Woodson and say, this is Mike Fisher's boss. We're wondering if he's a racist. Well, what's your take, Woody? I guess you could say that. They didn't say that, but they called him. And they asked him they said, this is Mike Fisher's boss. We got Mike sitting right here. We're talking to him about the way he covers the Cowboys. Can you give us your thought? And Darren Woodson very politely and intelligently told him about his relationship with Mike Fisher. He thought it was weird. He called me later. That was weird. I said, yeah, I'll explain. I don't know if I ever have explained to him. They said, okay, well, that's great. I said, let's do it again. What do you mean? Let's do it again. Flip it around again. Now, there's a couple times when he flipped it to the B's and his finger went on Berline, Steve. Well, he's white. Don't call him. He's of no use to us. Flip it again. Oh, you're on the I's. What do you got? Oh, you got Irvin, Michael. Call him. Okay, now, by this time, I'm getting pissed because I know I'm going to win. And I know that they're wasting my valuable time. I'll call him. I might have had him on speed dial, Irvin. Dink. He probably was number 2. Maybe he was number 8. Michael, this is Fisher. My boss needs to talk to you. I know this is weird. Bear with me. Hoo, 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 when he realized what they were really asking him. Irvin told them they were out of their minds. Irvin was Irvin. Thanks, Michael. Talk to you later. Well, Mike, we get to... No, I said, feeling my oats, let's do it again. And again. And again. We left a message for Tony Tolbert. I think we got a hold of Nate Newton. I made him talk to Pup Smith, Kevin Smith. I might have made him talk to Thomas Everett. And that was that. Might have made him talk to Hubbard Alexander, the wide receiver. Might come up on A's one time. Let's talk to Axe. So, I've been accused, after 32 years in Dallas, I've been accused of everything. It just comes with the territory. But don't come at me with that. Because I'll do to you what I did to my bosses. You'll look like a fool. You'll look like an ass. No matter what color you are. Fish out.